नमस्कार, मैं हूं भावना गुप्ता। शाम के 4 बज चुके हैं और स्वागत है आपका इंडिया एक्सपो सेंटर एंड मार्ट के बिजनेस इवेंट प्रिंट पैक 2019 में। आज इस बिजनेस इवेंट का 5वां दिन है और आप देख रहे हैं हमारा लाइव शो जिसका नाम है शो डेली। आज के हमारे जो कुछ खास मेहमान हैं हमारे साथ जुड़ चुके हैं। आज के विषयों के बारे में मैं आपको बताऊंगी, लेकिन उससे पहले मैं आपका परिचय कराना चाहूँगी हमारे आज के खास मेहमानों से। आज हमारे साथ इस चर्चा के लिए जुड़ चुके हैं मिस्टर साजिद, जो हु इज़ अ डायरेक्टर ऑफ इम्पेल वेलबाउंड। हमारे साथ जुड़ चुके हैं हमारे दूसरे मेहमान हु इज़ अ रिसर्चर मिस्टर नरेश खन्ना, हु इज़ अ रिसर्चर ऑफ इंडियन प्रिंटर एंड पब्लिशर। आज के मैं आपको टॉपिक भी बता देती हूँ। आज हम एजुकेशन के बारे में बात करेंगे, आज हम कमर्शियल बुक प्रिंटिंग के बारे में बात करेंगे और हाल ही में प्रिंट पैक 2019 में मिस्टर साजिद ने एक कैंपेन लॉन्च किया है बुक डेज, उसके बारे में भी हम सर से जानेंगे। तो चलिए अब चर्चा की शुरुआत करते हैं। सर, आपने कल एक डिस्कशन हुआ था आपका जो प्रिंटर्स और पब्लिशर्स हैं उनके साथ, और आपने कैंपेन इनिशिएट किया था बुक डेज, उसके बारे में थोड़ा हमारे दर्शकों को बताइए।
Book days is about increasing the consumption of books in India. We are looking at India specific. Books as a medium for education is anyway consumed in large numbers in India. India must be the largest consumer of educational books. The government textbooks alone are consumed above 2 billion copies per annum. But if you look at the readership of books, trade books, story books, it has declined over years. We have not had any growth, basically because we are seeing a generation passing from X generation to millennials, but our own fault, we have not made our children read books or expose them to the joy of reading a book, which is very different from viewing a movie or listening to a music, because book has a way of one-way communication with you, and it will also help you imagine things beyond what is written. And that storytelling or reading a book, that kind of habit is slowly dying down. If we don't encourage the children today to start reading back again, we will be probably left with a population of, let's say, 500 million parents who wouldn't have got exposed to books alone, who are not going to pass it down the line, because if they have not read, why would they do it? And we have seen more often than not, whatever data which has been given to us by publishers like Scholastic, who have tried to increase the readership, that if exposed to a book even now, the child would prefer it, try to play with it. It's not just that they will like the mobile phone or iPads alone. So it is something wrong with us, within us, not to have done it. Yes, it's a very large campaign. I don't know whether we as a very small company or a small body, part of a smaller organization or this thing, will be able to do it. But as we research more into that, we are seeing it's not just about us. There are many others also thinking in similar lines. We see a trend happening in education where the millennial parents are saying we don't want our children to be exposed to mobile phones at this age. Let them probably read books, let them play. There would be a different child coming out of it rather than someone who wants instant gratification. Yes, Google says this, I want it. So we are looking at increasing the readership, and that is basically among children. And we are seeking the help of the stakeholders, which are the publishers, printers, and people associated with that. I'm sure, I mean, sir would know more about the numbers because he's a researcher and a statistician. Uh, at least we are looking at 1 million people who can create a ripple, then which can form into a wave at some point of time. So book days is not a 1-day event or a 4-day event. We are looking at it as a celebration of Indian book print industry as far as books are concerned. How do we work together as an ecosystem to ensure that more books are read and these books are produced more cost effectively, and how do you engage a child with a book going beyond just the content of it, because content is the most important thing. But sometimes today what happens is a bestseller doesn't happen because it's well printed. It probably happens because a granny is reading a story to a small kid, and that becomes viral. So there have been many examples cited yesterday during our this thing. So we need to look at all these aspects. So what we are trying to do differently here is, though we are just a machine manufacturer, in the last 25 years we have been engaging publishers and printers at various levels talking about how to increase the book production in India, how to increase exports of books from India, and we have played a small role in creating platforms. These kind of things could be done because of our accessibility to both the publishers and the printers as a service provider. So we plan to take book days to different parts of the country, one at a time. Every month we'll have an engagement in a book printing center, let's say for example Meerut or Mathura, where we will seek the help of a leading national printer, maybe a Manipal or an IPP or a Thomson, who's already doing book work in a very large scale, a technical person from their team, a print production person from, let's say, a publisher, could be Elsevier or Scholastic or Penguin or Pearson. They would come along with us. We will talk to the printers and publishers there and then tell them about the best practices in this industry, how to produce a book well, and how to produce it smartly and more cost effectively, which we feel is probably the one role that we can take. And then also tell the society in large there. I mean, it's not just printers and publishers. We are all human beings, men and women. We need to understand if our next generation has to think differently, if they have to think laterally, they are not going to live in that digital world. In order to do that, they need to get out of that. So if we can make some small difference by doing that, then I think it's a job well done.
Okay, sir, what does your research say about this?
Sorry. Yeah. See, our research shows one or two slightly disturbing trends also. One trend that seems slightly disturbing is that K to 12 enrollment in government schools is very flat or actually declining. And on the other hand, the enrollment in the private schools is increasing. So most of the textbooks are actually being produced by the government and they are highly subsidized. But the book economy that is viable, which is the market economy, is the private education book economy, where publishers provide titles and they use the private education channels to actually distribute the books uh, for a price. That means these are not sold as loss-making books, but they are part of it's an industry. So one trend that is, I think, important to reverse in India, and which is has been reversed in Bangladesh successfully, is the trend of investment and growth in government schools. That means the investment by the central government in education has declined. In the last few years, it was 3.1% of GDP at one point, then it went to 2.9%, and in the past year, it was 2.7%. One year in between, it went up, then it came down to 2.7%. So this expenditure on education declining is a worrying thing, which I think we need to focus on. We need to address the government as an industry also, as book publishers, as educators, and as book printers. The three of us need to unite and have a common platform to address this issue. The second disturbing trend has been brought out recently by the ACER annual survey of the quality of educational outcomes, where they have found very disturbing results as far as what children can actually read, at what level, and at what level they can do mathematics. So there, one of the outcomes is that children in private schools are doing better. Now, this could lead to a knee-jerk reaction where people could be encouraged to send their children to private schools, which they are tending to do, partly because they feel those are the schools where their children will learn English, and English is one of the keys to the future for their children's well-being. So this is another part of another trend, which is that the language books many of the states need to be improved. In states like Kerala and West Bengal, you have thriving cultures in those languages, in Marathi also, in Tamil also, in Telugu also to some extent, in Kannada also to some extent, where you produce high quality content in those languages first, and then it is translated into English, if at all. But what is the need is, first of all, to develop more translation from one Indian language to another. Very often, what is happening now is you are going from Tamil to English, and then from English to Hindi. So, translation as a publishing investment, as a knowledge investment, as a skill investment, as a professional investment needs to be looked at also. That means the whole book supply chain depends on high quality content, and there additional investment is needed because the government textbooks, because they are so heavily subsidized, it's not clear what the authors are being paid. Are they the best authors? Who has the copyright? There are a number of issues connected with the quality of content. Also, there is the danger of the saffronization of the content. Okay? That means history is history and it should not be a coloring book. So, history and coloring books, there should be a difference. So, the quality of the content, the investment in public education is something to be looked at. The government law now allows, as a social investment by industry, as a part of their social obligation, they can invest in building a school. They get land at a subsidized rate, they build a school. Ostensibly, they are supposed to give free education to economically weaker sections. Just like when you build a hospital, you are supposed to have some beds for the economic weaker section. But it has been found, at least in the Delhi NCR, the hospitals who were given land for that purpose never had a single bed for the economically weaker sections. And I am not sure what the situation is as far as private schools, which are being funded by the big corporates as part of their social obligation to society and for which they are receiving some income tax benefits. So education is a very serious topic in which the government needs to invest. Then, if you have smaller countries like Norway or Finland, the government actually pays for every translation into their language and buys 3,000 copies. I believe this is the role of our governments. This is the role of our state governments. This is the role of our state education boards. And the role of our government is not to have Air India and to do many other things that it is still quite involved in. So I think education is a priority. Education cannot be left to private industry. It cannot be left to become a school book industry or a education mill, a private gold mine. I think education is something where it's been declared by the Constitution to be a basic right, and to make that happen, I think more focus is needed. So these are some of the things that the IPP Star survey has shown, and I have some of Sajid's comments before I reflect a bit more on that.
So, what is your take on education system in India?
I think it definitely requires a complete overhaul. It's still a teaching based system, while as there is no scope provided for learning. We are still based on what is being taught in classes. The actual experiencing outside the classrooms are limited. I can only talk from the angle of slightly higher education, not the K-12. Uh, even when we did engineering, we were sent to classrooms and then taught about various subjects related to our engineering, whether it is a workshop or a metallurgy course or things, without having any kind of practical experience on this. And when we started collaborating with some of the Swiss and German companies for some technology, we realized they have a very beautiful system. After you do your 10th standard, 2 years, if you suppose you want to continue that course of engineering, after 2 years you are supposed to work in a company where they are producing products, where, like what he talked about, the CSR activities, it is actually mandatory for those companies to have training schools within their campus, uh, where they'll be taught about the basics about engineering, and they'll work there for 2 years. And they go with that vision that, these are the things what happens in the current day, modern day applications in engineering, and then they go back to the classroom. So maybe there is a complete overall needed as far as education is concerned, and books is just one part of education. I mean, it's only one very small part of education which is still integral, and despite digital being there, it's also continuing to be playing a larger role there. It's again because teaching is taking precedence over learning. So my take on this is definitely government investments are needed. Government for health, education, these are basic necessities, and if you let private industry take over these, the social obligation of the government is completely lost. It is important that government plays a large role in it, but to bring in quality there, I think there will be a lot of fundamental changes to be made. So it's not an easy thing. It's very difficult.
I think, uh, like many things connected with the printing industry, partly because the printing industry has been somewhat fragmented, the society itself is unaware of the scale and the importance of it also. Because printers tend to be small, owner managed companies, uh, they have not been able to actually build a platform to communicate uh, what they offer to the society in terms of employment, what they actually produce in terms of educational product, and they have not been able to synthesize any kind of an idea of what are the challenges and what are the ways to go forward. And for that reason, IPP Star, IPP Services Training and Research, for the last 20 years, has been actually researching this entire industry. And of course, when we started in 1999 doing the research, people said it's impossible. And it is difficult. But over the last 20 years, we have done about 7 or 8,000 face-to-face interviews across the country in about 60 or 70 cities and towns, and clusters, printing clusters, publishing clusters, and quite a big model has been developed, and quite a good idea has taken shape as far as how it is possible now to actually develop the numbers if we want them. If we want them. The key issue is if we want these numbers. And as you can see from the newspapers every day, part of our society is now using numbers only to exaggerate things, only to manipulate reality. But if we are interested in the truth, I think the research can be done. And the kind of research we have done on the book industry recently, in the past 7 or 8 months, of India and Bangladesh, I think is quite interesting and can demonstrate some of the uh, issues and some of the opportunities that are there. For instance, taken together with the ACER report, for instance. And then there are other researches also which are throwing up very, very interesting opportunities in data. Ironically, some of the data that is being thrown up is because of the failure of the education system. For instance, one of the big industries now in India is that everyone from kindergarten to postgraduate level is doing some outside education, because the education that's supposed to be taking place in the schools and the colleges is not happening the way it's supposed to happen for these people to actually qualify for some skill-based employment or to qualify for some entrance exam, etc.
Tell us something about outside education. What is outside education?
Meaning
Outside education. You
outside.
said, हाँ, you said ना कि outside education ज़्यादा होने लगी. So what is outside education for you?
I, by outside education, I didn't catch that. What did you mean?
Already talking about it.
Yeah.
That core schools are providing certain levels of teaching. That's not anymore sufficient. You have to depend on private institutions or coaching classes
Yeah.
outside.
I'll,
Okay, that is
That is
outside
what.
yeah.
education.
What I meant is in quota, for instance. Now, I was talking to somebody today, a printer. He has to send his son to quota because his son wants to go to medical school. So he said number of seats are opening up in AIMS in the coming 2 years. His son is very keen. So I said, why can't it be done in Delhi? His family comes from Lucknow. I asked a Lucknow printer, whose mother is an educator, why can't it be done in Lucknow? No, it cannot be done. It can only be done in Kota. At this point, it is perceived that only Kota has this special level of medical school preparation that is needed. So, by outside education, I mean all this preparation that everyone is doing. One is preparation for some higher goal, but the other thing is the failure of the schools to, to educate you enough to pass the exam, so that you have to go to your neighbor who is a tutor and pay for tuition. Or sometimes the same teacher who's teaching in the school, she was doing outside tuitions. So for her, that's a source of revenue and income. So that means there's a parallel education system to make up for the defects in the established, entitled government education system, particularly. So one is that there are high aspirations, which are beyond what the education system can supply. The other is that there is a failure of the outcome in the government school system. So it's not sufficient. So either you will transfer your child to a private school or private school plus tuitions. So this is the outside system. And the scale of that system, by the way, is bigger in value than the entire book industry. That means the printed book industry is smaller than the educational aid industry. That's what our research has shown. And the scope also for growth is also very, very high.
Mr. Sajid, for you, my question is because you are into this industry, printing industry, which sector is doing better, the digital printing or offset printing?
I think we would consider ourselves as a stakeholder in producing books. Uh, though we call ourselves part of the print industry, we are uh, relegated to a vertical called as book printing. That's our intense focuses. But overall, if I were to look at the different segments within the print industry, uh, which is again, as print also means different substrates, different methods of printing. I'll subject myself to the offset printing or the digital printing, which is printing on paper. Book printing is on the growth path. We are seeing more and more books being produced every year on year. The challenges are only related to cost. How more cost efficiently can you do it every year? The number or volumes are not a problem. Uh, we are also seeing growth in converting, which is related to either pharma or FMCG, where you have products made for primary packaging. Uh, what was earlier known as commercial print, which is printing brochures, leaflets, danglers, they are on a decline path. So the current phase that we are in book printing is in my 25 years, this is one of the best years. So we used to think that books will decline at some point of time. That has been the general feel. But we see more and more books being consumed, and an activity related to book printing also going up. So we are seeing better sales, better uh, better interactions with customer, more interest. more printers coming into book printing. So this is my call.
सर क्योंकि अब शायद वो ज़माना नहीं रहा कि बच्चे या फिर बड़े वो बुक्स को पढ़े, ठीक है, क्योंकि अब इतना टाइम भी नहीं है लोगों के पास। अब क्या होता है कि अपने मोबाइल में देखते हैं, यूट्यूब पे जाते हैं, किसी भी टॉपिक पे उनको सर्च करना होता है तो वो यूट्यूब पे जाके गूगल करते हैं और पूरा का पूरा जो भी उनको जानना है वो इन्फॉर्मेशन पूरी वहाँ से मिल जाती है। तो आपको लगता है कि अब इस टाइम में अब ये जो वर्ल्ड है इतना डिजिटल हो चुका है, अब फिर से लोग वापस बुक्स पे आ पाएंगे, जो बुक्स का फ्यूचर है वो फिर से एक बार ब्राइट हो सकेगा?
It's a good question. It's the same thing that we are trying to challenge and look at it from a different angle. Look at all these perspectives. So, according to me, digital is not a threat for books. I mean, I can give you the best example of e-books versus physical books. You would have probably heard. Uh, E-books came in, people started saying that the physical book print industry is going to die because I can download 10 books in one device and take it to my holiday and then read them. I don't need to pack a bag full of books. Uh, but ebooks sales was on a real growth path for some time and they've started plateauing. Now you're seeing the physical books going up. What has happened? The challenge is not whether it is digital, offset, all those kind of things. The challenge is reading. So if you can have more people reading, then the books will go up, and physical books as well as e-books, all those things will get some considerable interest in them. Today, even if you look at it, I don't have any kind of data. Probably Naresh would have that better in terms of what is the per capita consumption of reading of trade books or education. Education we can still estimate, but trade books are very difficult. Even the publishers do not have that kind of real-time data in terms of how many Hindi books are read, how many books in Malayalam are read, and things like that. It will take some time. And even the printing is like the newspaper industry. You have a print run and a reader. If I buy a book, I and my daughter would read it in my home. So these kind of things are, we don't have any data for it. Yes, it is a challenge. We are saying we don't have time. We are rushing. But reading stories, reading books, it's a leisure activity. It's a leisure habit, and it takes you to a different space altogether. Why do you go for watching a movie in a theater, even when everything is available? Yes, it's also gone through its own changes of the single screen cinemas to multiplexes and popcorns being replaced by more expensive popcorns. All those changes are happening. Reading a book is to develop an individual. Reading a story is to spend some time with a book and then understand something about what is not your current. I mean, you are taken into a world of imagination. You are taken into a world where you could play with things, you could imagine things. So it is actually developing your skills or ability to think beyond what you see. While as the digital world will tell you what it is. So there is a difference between the two. So it is important that we as parents understand that it is important to expose our children to that world which is beyond just telling them, yes, this is the answer. No, there could be another answer. If you want to know that other answer, unless you read books, it's not going to happen. So it is very unique in its delivery of objectives. Book is a very, very, very different instrument. I have still not found any replacement for it. As long as there are no such replacement, I wouldn't be worried about digital output.
See, on this issue of digital, part of our book industry research involved doing 300 interviews of readers at the Jaipur Literary Festival and the World Book Fair. And overall, beyond just these interviews, what we have found is that um, a great number of college students, for instance, will never buy a book, will never buy a textbook, they will download the PDF. But ultimately, what will happen in India also is that books which are not easy to get, they will be available from the club on a subscription model where you will rent only the chapter you need. The actual fact is that even now, when you download the PDF, you can get through, you can pass using a, but you will have to buy a crib sheet book. You'll have to buy another book which is a kunji to get through the course. So a book is involved. And 10 copies of that book or 20 copies of that book will have to be in the college library, which are normally sold at a higher price as a hardcover edition, library edition. So great amount of the value of being produced in India is for the textbook, higher secondary and higher secondary, college and postgraduate books for the libraries for education. So that is there. On the other hand, in trade books, that means children's books up to fiction, novels, other books that people read for their enjoyment, non-fiction, all kinds of books in all the Indian languages, the value is quite high. It's a huge number. And this is a number which is industrial in the sense it is not subsidized. In some cases, it's tragically loss-making because the Hindi publishers, when they supply the books, they're often bought by government libraries. Many people don't know that in Delhi, there are 5,000 government libraries which are not open to the public. These are libraries in some bhavan or the other, some industry house, and some other kinds of places. But public libraries in Delhi are only two. One in Chandni Chowk and one other one and one mobile one. Unlike Kerala, which follows a law passed in 1950, which is an Indian library law. And Kerala has widespread libraries throughout the state, in villages and towns. So there are a lot of things that are going to change. Reading habits are going to change. What we have found is that although, yes, the students will not buy a college textbook, they will buy other books. When you track the Indian consumption of books per capita, which is below 10, far below 10, and you compare it to Europe, where the consumption of books is 44 books per capita. And even in the United States, they tried in some states not to give textbooks to children, school books. They gave them iPads. It backfired. They had to go back to books. So there also, the level is over 40 books per capita.